into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, December 23rd. I am Frank Sample, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we are jumping back into prospects, this time counting down Scott's top 25 outfield prospect. Lots of names for Dynasty, but also some big ones to know for redraft leagues as well. So in case you're tuning in and you're like, I don't know if I need to know about all these prospects, you probably do. Of course. Wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all. And for anybody listening to the podcast, Chris, we're going to need a description, a full breakdown of the pajamas you are currently wearing.
So I'm a little frustrated because we get Christmas pajamas every year. Either my mom or my mother-in-law sends them for us. We got this. I'm holding it up. It's a little Santa Claus, just having a merry old time in the snow as Santa does. But I can't wear them because they're for this Christmas, obviously. And
can't break them out till Christmas Eve.
Yeah, we're recording on the 16th. So this is the past. I don't want to do that. And I couldn't find any of my Christmassy tops.
Yeah.
So my sister-in-law got me pajamas for Christmas a couple years ago with my dog Stevie's face on them. So that's what I'm wearing. So that's little Stevie on my pajamas.
I'm trying to figure out. So they have to be like fresh from the package on Christmas Eve.
The first time you wear them is every year is for Christmas. Then you can wear them whenever you want.
So you're not a wash it before you wear it kind of guy.
We probably wash. I don't know. My wife takes care of that. I just do what I'm told, Okay. I'm sure she will wash it before we wear them. But the point is I wouldn't wear it until Christmas, whether, we washed it or not.
Okay. Kind of.
I wondered if that was just a universal thing, because my mom does the same thing. She gets us Christmas pajamas every year, and I have, 10 pairs of Christmas pajamas.
But I don't I'm a little worried. I don't know where all the, I know I have one that's it's like a bunch of animals having a little Christmas party. There's a little iguana with a hat and a puppy and a kitty, and they're all hanging out, having eggnog or whatever. And I can't find it. I'm distraught, frankly.
Well, you got a week and a couple days to pull it off, Chris. So we're rooting for you, bud. Let's get into Scott's top 25 outfield prospects. As usual, with all these positions that we've mentioned, there are articles accompanying them on the site. So if you want to go and read more about these prospects, feel free to do exactly that. We will go in groups of 3 from 25 through 11 and then focus a little bit more on the top 10. But outfield prospects number 25 through 23, we have Alan Roden of the Blue Jays, Zach Veen of the Rockies, and Chandler Simpson of the Rays. Alan Roden, a little bit older, 24 years old. He's a third-round pick back in 2022. An older prospect, chips in across the board.
He's a squirrely little guy.
I think there's a chance, he could have some value as soon as 2025 here with the Blue Jays. Zach Veen is a name we have heard about for years. Some prospect fatigue, I think, for some people who've, again, you've just heard his name mentioned many times. But 23 years old, lots of speed with Zach Veen. He's also dealt with a lot of injuries. And Chandler Simpson is someone who's popped up this offseason with the Tampa Bay Rays because they traded away Jose Siri. They could have some openings in the outfield. And he is probably the fastest player in all of baseball. He had over 100 steals in the minors. That also came with 1 home run. An inside the park home run. It did not even go over the fence. How about that? Yeah. Scott, what do you got here on Chandler Simpson, Zach Veen, and Alan Roden?
Well, I think this is a really fun group. And part of the reason it's such a fun group is because I feel like outfield is the position where I ranked the furthest beyond the consensus. So at every position, there's a certain number of players that, okay, they obviously have to be there. Everybody understands their top prospects, but then you reach a point where the consensus frays a bit, and you get to dip into those cheese balls, those personal cheese balls. And so what I was trying to do here at the end of my outfield rankings was highlight some players who I feel like if they became something for fantasy this year, I wouldn't regret not telling you about them before the year. That was kind of my thinking. So what I like about Alan Roden, he doesn't strike me as a huge ceiling kind of guy, Like the power production is the most questionable part of the profile here, but his contact, line drive, and on-base skills are all so good that it's hard for me to see Alan Roden being an out-and-out failure. And I think there's a chance he becomes a good enough power hitter to be like a real difference maker in fantasy, because his max exit velocity at AAA was 112 miles per hour. And his pull rate was over 50%. So he knows how to maximize his power by pulling the ball, and he actually hits it pretty hard for not having that much home run production. 16 home runs at 451 at bats. That's Alan Roden. He's 25, like you said. Zach Veen, we've heard about him a lot. Of course, he used to be one of the tip-top prospects in baseball soon after he was drafted. What year was that? That was like, I think it was 2020, actually. And as he's gone up the ladder, his numbers have gotten worse. And they've been pretty bad over the past few years, but 2 of those years he was playing through wrist issues that he finally had surgery to correct going into last year. And he started last year after that surgery, slashing 326, 418, 568 in 28 games. And then he had back issues, and then he had thumb issues and missed a lot of time, and the numbers were dragged down. And I'm just not sure we've seen Zach Veen healthy much in the last 3 years. And the little bit of time we did see him healthy, those first 28 games, he looked like a stud still. And obviously playing at Coors Field helps to raise his batting average potential. He should at least steal a lot of bases. That's Zach Veen. And finally, Chandler Simpson, maybe the most interesting of these 3 players. You kind of went into his whole profile already, the 104 stolen bases. It's not a profile that we see much or that works much in the modern game. The last players who I think had an extended run of success like this, Michael Bourne, Juan Pierre. Some people point out Billy Hamilton, but Billy Hamilton pretty much just stole bases. He was even at the time he was around stealing those bases, it was like, man, he's such a liability and everything else. Juan Pierre could hit for average. Michael Bourne could hit for average. Chandler Simpson hit 355 between high A and double A. And what I like about him compared to some of these other slap hitting speedsters that have come up through the minors is he seems to know exactly who he is. He doesn't try for power at all. His fly ball rate was below 20% at double A last year. He hits the ball to the opposite field more than he pulls it. So he is selling out for singles, basically, and then just letting his feet do the talking once he gets on base. And I could see it working. Xavier Edwards this past year for the Marlins gives me hope, because it's a profile like that, just maybe even to a further extreme for Chandler Simpson. So somebody to keep an eye on there.
Chris, I don't think either Zach Veen or Chandler Simpson will be on our radars on draft day, but could see either or both making an impact in 2025. Do you have a preference? Do you have an expectation that either one will help us out in fantasy next season?
I think Chandler Simpson is probably kind of hopeless. It's just like even the Xavier Edwards comp. Like Xavier Edwards at AAA was running ISOs around 100 and 3 stops at AAA. Before that, it was more like 70, which is super, super low. And look, maybe Chandler Simpson will get there, but his ISO in 32 games in high A last year was 0.008. He had 1 extra base hit in 32 games. He got to double A and the power really turned on there. He had 15 extra base hits in 78 games. I get it. Like I can see like, yeah, maybe he just runs super high BABIPs and he's able to beat out a bunch of infield hits and it can work, but like probably not. Like it's really hard to have good plate discipline in the majors with 0 power. So I don't know, like if he's a really good defender, I can see him Billy Hamiltoning it to the majors, but it seems like a super long shot to actually work out.
Yeah, and that's a weird part of Chandler Simpson's game is that so far he really hasn't played great defense in the outfield despite being incredibly fast. He's actually drafted as a second baseman, so he's still kind of learning his way through the outfield. But there could be an opportunity. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Rays traded Siri, and it's not like they have great names in their outfield currently. So we could potentially see Chandler Simpson in 2025. Before we hit our first break, just a reminder that Fantasy Baseball Today is a finalist for the best baseball podcast in the Sports Podcast Awards. And the finals come down to a fan vote. So we need your help. If you're watching on YouTube, scan the QR code that will take you to the website, or head to the link in the episode description. Click on the thumbs up next to the FBT logo, and then punch in your info. And it's easy as that. We really do appreciate it. Let's take our first break. When we return, more outfield prospects right after this.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back in. Continuing on the countdown of outfield prospects, numbers 22 through 20. We have Bo Davidson with the Giants, Aidan Smith with the Rays, and Enrique Bradfield with the Orioles. Bo Davidson, 22 years old, an undrafted prospect. Could be a 5-tool player. I mean, he hit 327 with a 437 on-base percentage in the minors this season. Mostly came at A-ball. Aidan Smith, 20 years old. He actually came over to the Rays in the Randy Arozarena trade, and another potential 5-tool player. He's got big speed. He had 41 steals in the minors this season. And Enrique Bradfield with the Orioles. He was a first-round pick in last year's draft, 2023. Incredible speed and defense. There's a little bit more power than someone like Chandler Simpson, but Bradfield had 74 steals, and we are talking elite level defense. Scott, anything to add here on Bradfield, Aidan Smith, and Bo Davidson?
So Davidson and Aidan Smith, Bo Davidson and Aidan Smith, that's kind of the end of the personal cheese balls, and then you get more into the consensus there with Enrique Bradford at number 20. I'm really sticking my neck out for Bo Davidson because you're not going to see him on many prospect lists. Everybody's a little wary of him because he went undrafted in 2023. We're not talking that long ago. Teams didn't even deem him worth drafting. And he was just such a surprise last year. After he came back from a hamstring injury in July, he slashed 405, 522, 763, hitting 9 home runs in 38 games. And he's an athletic guy too. It's not just he's 22 years old and he's beating up on lesser competition. I mean, it's part of that. I don't expect him to hit 405 as he moves up the ladder, but I think there's like legitimate talent here that was just overlooked, and we saw it on display over his final 38 games last year. That's Bo Davidson of the Giants. Aidan Smith came over in the Randy Arozarena trade to the Rays. We tend to like minor leaguers that the Rays target in trades. Tends to go well. And I'm not really sure why there isn't more attention on him. I think just it's hard to highlight everybody. Now, obviously a deep position.
And in that organization, he'd probably be a top 10 guy in most organizations, but
yeah,
Baseball Prospectus has him 13th in what they view as the deepest organization in baseball.
So he's 20, Aidan Smith. He was at low A. He put up good numbers there, 288 batting average, 874 OPS, got on base a ton, 41 stolen bases. The power's still developing, but it's there. It exists. He's just kind of underdeveloped physically. It reminds me a good bit of Evan Carter, actually, a similar skill set, athletic guy with good plate discipline, and just needs to add muscle mass to start tapping into that power more. But if he does that, Aidan Smith already knows how to elevate and pull well. His rates on both of those are great. So his swing is set up for power, which I don't even think was true for Evan Carter for most of his minor league career. So I think he's, a lot of times that's what minor league hitters struggle with, is just learning to maximize that raw power. He's still growing into the power, but he knows how to maximize it already. So Aidan Smith is somebody I'm especially high on. Enrique Bradfield, you kind of laid it out already. Big speed guy like Chandler Simpson. But the biggest difference between him and Simpson is he is a stellar defender. So Enrique Bradfield is going to have a role in the majors for sure. It's a question of whether he becomes an everyday player and whether he produces enough in batting average. I think that'll determine whether he's impactful in fantasy. It's a limited ceiling, obviously, since Enrique Bradfield isn't going to hit for much power. But could he have trying to think of a good comp for him. I guess I don't know, Cedric Mullins, same team. Less power, more speed than Mullins, but that kind of he could be that level of impact in fantasy.
Yeah, and he feels like a pretty clear Cedric Mullins replacement for the Orioles long-term, too, because Mullins is a free agent after next season. Enrique Bradfield, he's 23 years old. He got up to 27 games at AA, so he could potentially be a late season promotion for the Orioles, but they already have so many names that we usually talk about. If they need the defense, he absolutely could be up and just whatever, bat him ninth in the lineup, whatever that might be. But yeah, it seems like a pretty clear replacement for Cedric Mullins in the future. Moving on through outfield prospects, numbers 19 through 17, we have Justin Crawford with the Phillies, Jason Chourio with the Guardians, and Kevin Alcantara with the Cubs. Justin Crawford, the son of former major leaguer Carl Crawford. He's 20 years old, first-round pick out of high school, and no surprise, pretty similar skill set to his dad, hits for batting average, a little bit of pop, tons of speed and defense. Jason Chourio, the younger brother of Jackson. He's 19 years old, signed out of Venezuela, had a .414 on base percentage as a 19-year-old at A-ball this year. The power is still developing, but 44 steals. Pretty interesting skill set there as well. And then Kevin Alcantara is a name that we've heard about for a while as well. He's 22 years old, on the Cubs, big dude, 6'6", lots of upside. We haven't really seen it translate to big numbers in the minors yet. 14 home runs and 14 steals throughout 111 games this past season. Chris, how about you get a word in here? Anyone you'd like to touch on? Anyone that stands out here that you might have a quick thought on? Justin Crawford, Jason Chourio, Kevin Alcantara.
Yeah, I mean, Alcantara stands out just because it's hard to see when he gets an opportunity, given the current standing of things in Chicago. Because one, they already have too many outfielders at the major league level. Like, I think we're expecting Seiya Suzuki to get a lot of DH time. We're expecting Cody Bellinger to get traded. And still, this is a full outfield. It was a full outfield before they traded for Kyle Tucker. And Kevin Alcantara will not be the last Cubs outfield prospect that we talk about today. So I think that's the one where it becomes, lost my fantasy football matchup just now. It becomes tougher to see how he gets an opportunity this year, but he's still only 21. He's still only played 35 games at AAA, even though he did get up to the majors last season. The book is not written. It's just, does he get the opportunity with the Cubs this year? Mm-hmm. Does he get traded? Obviously the Cubs are, as we're talking, linked to Jesus Lazaro with Owen Caissie mentioned as a possible return. That might be asking for too much from the Marlins, but I could see settling for Kevin Alcantara and another piece. That would make sense.
By the time people are listening to this podcast,
it could
maybe
already
that
be
trade's
done.
already
That's the problem.
Maybe Alcantara has already been traded. I don't know.
But as we speak, it's not clear where he plays, but
yeah,
these things tend to work themselves out. So that's the thing with Alcantara.
He's not a finished product yet. And that's becoming a concern in itself, because it's kind of been the same scouting report for Alcantara for years now. Okay.
He should hit for more power.
He hits the ball really hard. He's very athletic, but he strikes out too much. Well, he still strikes out too much. He's still not actualizing that power very well. He's still not stealing as many bases as you'd like for him to, as fast as he is. And so at some point, I feel like already prospect fatigue is starting to kick in for this guy. He actually debuted last year. I need to add those numbers to the article here. He went 1 for 10. So it wasn't like an electric debut or anything for the Cubs. Yeah, it'll take further development from him and or injury to get him in the mix. But he's nearing a point where he has to show something, Kevin Alcantara, I think, to remain a highly regarded prospect. These other two just below him, 18 and 19, Jaison Chourio, obviously the brother of Jackson, and Justin Crawford, son of Carl Crawford, as you mentioned. They're kind of part of this trend here, this position more than any other. You know, we've already had Chandler Simpson. We've already had Enrique Bradfield. The comps I'm coming up for these guys are like from 20 plus years ago.
Mhm.
I mean, the ideal comp for Justin Crawford is exactly his dad, a guy who could be elite in batting averages and stolen bases without being a total zero in power. And we just don't see that profile much in the majors. We haven't over the past couple decades. And maybe that guy just isn't capable of succeeding anymore. But you got teams who are targeting these guys again. And it makes me wonder if with the shift ban taking effect, if with the all the changes to make stolen bases more plentiful with the pickoff limits and everything, if teams are starting to think this player could work again. I mentioned it already once, Zyhir Edwards. It was not a full season of success, but it was several months of success. And I think there was a lot of skepticism over whether he could be that impactful. So, yeah, I mean, Justin Crawford puts the ball on the ground way too much, but you could see everything going right. Him being kind of like Carl Crawford with the great batting average, the great stolen base totals, and not a total zero for speed because the exit velocities are actually decent. Jaison Chourio, teams, scouts actually do give him a chance of developing a decent amount of power.
He's a bigger dude. Like he's 6'1". He's just not at all physically developed yet.
I made the comparison for Jaison Chourio and Jackson Chourio, like Ronald Acuna and Luis Angel Acuna, where I feel like Jason's obviously the Luis Angel, who himself scouts thought could develop power and showed pretty good power for the limited time he was in the majors last year. But obviously he's not going to rise to the level of his older brother.
Mm-hmm. Let's continue on in the countdown. Outfield prospects 16 through 14. We have Cole Carrigg with the Rockies, Braden Montgomery with the now White Sox, and Jonny Farmelo with the Mariners. Cole Carrigg, 22 years old, 65th overall pick in 2023, mostly known for his speed and versatility. He's played center field, shortstop, and catcher, which is just such an interesting combination. Had 17 home runs with 53 steals this year for Cole Carrigg. Braden Montgomery, 21 years old, first-round pick in this year's draft, came over to the White Sox in the Garrett Crochet deal, has yet to debut because of a fractured ankle, but there's big power potential here. Looks like there's some swing and miss in his game as well. And then Jonny Farmelo of the Mariners, he's 20 years old, the 29th overall pick in 2023. He was limited to just 46 games this year due to a torn ACL, but there's big speed here and looks like a pretty solid hit tool as well. Scott, what do you have here on Jonny Farmelo, Braden Montgomery, and Cole Carrigg?
Yeah, Cole Carrigg was a big riser this past year, and there's still a fair amount of skepticism surrounding him, but the numbers are so good. I mean, the numbers look like something Corbin Carroll would put up in the majors. 283 batting average, 17 homers, 53 steals. That's in high A mostly, so still pretty far down the ladder, still not seeing a lot of breaking balls yet. But the knock on Cole Carrigg was that he is not all that polished yet, really athletic. But the numbers don't read that way. And maybe maybe it'll show if once he starts seeing more of those breaking balls, maybe that limited experience will show more in the numbers. But the stat line doesn't look like a guy who is raw. And so I get the feeling that Carrigg is just progressing really quickly. I mean, the fact that he's handling the three most demanding defensive positions at once. I mean, it looks like he's leaving catcher behind. He's maybe a Cedon Rafaela type splitting between center field and shortstop. But
yeah, he didn't play catcher last year, right?
I think that was only in his first season in 2020. Yeah.
And even there, it was only 7 games.
Yeah. So I think he's put that behind him. But the point is, like, they don't let the inexperienced guy handle those positions in particular. Mm-hmm. So I think he's won over a lot of people in the past year, but we'll see how he does at the higher levels. That's Cole Carrigg. Braden Montgomery and Johnny Farmelo don't have a lot of at-bats to their name yet in the minors. Montgomery obviously was just drafted. He actually hasn't played in the minors yet, but we've already seen him in the news because he was part of the Garrett Crochet deal, going from the Red Sox to the White Sox. Thought to have a lot of power potential, good plate discipline, just a lot of upside overall. And Farmelo, his issue is that he was hurt. He's coming back from ACL surgery. He's not going to be ready for the start of 2025 even. But he earns high marks for pitch recognition and plate discipline. Very fast runner. I've seen the I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I'm having trouble remembering people's names these days. Jarren Duran. I've seen the Jarren Duran comp out there for Johnny Farmelo.
I will point out Braden Montgomery is he was also hurt last year. He fractured his ankle, I believe, at the end of the college season, missed the end of the College World Series. 27 homers in 61 games at Texas A&M. Not like a horribly worrisome strikeout to walk ratio, but 59 strikeouts in 61 games in college. That's a red flag. And then the underlying data was, I believe he was 25th percentile or worse in zone contact rate and overall contact rate among college players. So that's a concern. And I've seen some people who are pretty down on him as one of the big pieces in the Garrett Crochet trade. I mean, look, we just haven't seen him against pros, right? Like Cam Smith went a pick after him in last year's draft, had like 27 good games in the minors. And now everybody loves Cam Smith. And Braden Montgomery could have done that, or he could have had a Charlie Condon debut where he really struggled. And, I don't think in Condon's case, it's really changed how people view him, but Montgomery, there's a lot of question marks around the ability to make enough contact. So that's going to be the key thing for him.
Pretty universally a top 100 guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I saw a top 100 list without him. Not that they're fully updated yet. I don't know why it changed since he hasn't played a minor league game.
I think he's just controversial.
Yeah.
There are relatively wide-ranging opinions on him.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to 13 through 11 in Scott's top outfield prospects. We have Owen Caissie with the Cubs, Robert Calaz with the Rockies, and Zyhir Hope with the Dodgers. Owen Caissie, 22 years old, second-round pick back in 2020. Huge power potential here. Only had 19 home runs, but, man, the max exit velocity at AAA, 115.5. Lots of strikeouts in the profile as well for Owen Caissie. Robert Calaz, 19 years old, out of the Dominican Republic. He showed off 5 category potential, but mostly known for massive power upside. Hit 344, 12 home runs, 15 steals, a 1079 OPS in 62 games. He's a little bit further away, though. I mean, MLB.com has him 2028 as the ETA for Robert Calaz. And Zyhir Hope, 19 years old, came over from the Cubs in the Michael Busch trade. And this dude packs a punch. 5'10". He's built like a running back. He's loaded with power and speed potential. Some questions about the strikeouts and batting average, but he got on base at a 419 clip this season in the minors. Hit a 470-foot home run in the Arizona Fall League. Scott, I mean, this group is just power potential for days. Owen Caissie, Robert Calaz, and Zyhir Hope.
Yeah, now we're really getting into the stud outfield prospects, the ones who very easily could be top 10, and they just happen to be 11 through 13 instead. Caissie is the furthest along, obviously. Spent all of last year at AAA, 22 years old. Could probably, depending on where he is, currently with the Cubs organization, but depending on where he is at the start of 2025, could compete for an opening day job. But he hasn't optimized that power yet. It's the more common situation. Remember with Aidan Smith, I referred to him not having a lot of like pure strength yet, but having the optimal spray angle off the bat for power. Owen Caissie's the more common scenario of being just the opposite. Hits the ball really hard, but suboptimal spray angle. So he hasn't really played up to his power potential yet. And you'd like to see him do that in the minors before getting a shot in the majors. Only 19 home runs in about 550 plate appearances last year. But upside wise, Kyle Schwarber, I think, is what you can dream on here for Owen Caissie. It's that 3 true outcomes profile, which I always go to Adam Dunn when I think of that, but he's the most extreme version of that. I think Kyle Schwarber is the more realistic one. Obviously, kind of a best case scenario, though. Robert Calaz of the Rockies is like fantasy. The fantasy people who really emphasize prospects are just in love with this guy. And I mean, the numbers are amazing. And he did reach full season ball. He made it to low A. Wasn't just playing in rookie ball, only 19 years old, but he started to reach the levels of minor league play where we have to begin to take the production seriously. And in the 13 games he played at low A, Robert Calaz / 327, 386, 571. So it didn't slow down at all, and seems to be on a clear upward trajectory. Zyhir Hope is
he is
one.
your favorite prospect guy's favorite prospect. I feel like everybody, like, the numbers last year were pretty good for a full season debut. He only played 54 games at A ball, but 905 OPS. But he's one that just, like, I think aesthetically, people just love Zyhir Hope's swing, and he's super strong. He's already putting up, 111 mile per hour max exit velos as a 19-year-old. He's the one that I feel like if he was a top 15 guy next year overall, I don't think anybody would really be surprised.
Yep. No, I agree. Big fan. And it helps that he's in the hands of the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Because him and the other player they acquired in the Michael Busch deal from the Cubs is somebody we'll talk about on the Pitching Prospects podcast. And that's Jackson Ferris. I feel like Zyhir Hope and Jackson Ferris both, they went to the Dodgers and immediately they had the kind of season that turned them into prospects at least as high end as Busch ever was, maybe even beyond that.
Are you saying the Dodgers saved Ferris?
Apparently, yeah, they did, and they have hope too.
Frank, we'll show you that movie later.
Yes, I think I have an idea. I think I know what you're talking about. Maybe we'll talk about it after this. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll get into the top 10 outfield prospects right after this.
Welcome to JJ's.
I'll have a... Wait, there's no way I can get a burger?
No chance. But you can have the NFL on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus. Oh, hang on. There's a toy.
Welcome back in. We are into the top 10 outfield prospects. And at number 10, we have Chase DeLauter with the Cleveland Guardians, 23 years old, a first-round pick back in 2022. The guy has just not been able to stay healthy. He broke the same foot twice already. But when he plays, it looks like he can do it all. Hit for batting average. There's a good eye at the plate. There's power. There's speed. And based on, the Guardians' current roster, it feels like he has a pretty good chance to play in right field at some point in 2025. The question is, can he stay on the field, Scott? What do you think about Chase DeLauter?
Yeah, unfortunately, the foot is starting to remind me a little of Alex Kirilloff's wrist. So I would say Chase DeLauter's prospect stock is in a precarious spot right now. I was tempted to rank him lower, but there is a lot of upside here as a hitter, and he is theoretically so close to making good on it. Remember, there was a campaign to get him on the Guardians opening day roster last year because he was electric in spring training. Trying to find the numbers for that. Last spring, Chase DeLauter hit .520 with 4 home runs, more walks than strikeouts in 13 games. So he looked like he was ready. But yeah, injuries continue. He's had the foot operated on twice. He then broke it again this past year. And great hit tool, good power potential, but just needs to stay on the field.
He's played 108 games as a pro since being drafted in 2022. And that is including 12 games at the Arizona Fall League. The problem is the sample size is so small, but like he really doesn't look like he's been challenged yet. It's just how much of that is like he played 30 games at AA this year and had a 770 OPS. That's not great. It was 19 strikeouts and 128 plate appearances. That's really good. Like I don't even know. You kind of can't say what he is right now. It's a little bit of a mystery box, but all of the scouting reports, everything is super positive on him. He's got like a weird swing. It's a little unorthodox, but the results going back to, I mean, he was what, the number 5 pick in the draft. So
DeLauter?
yeah.
I don't think it was quite that high, but he was
Not quite
a
that
first
high.
rounder.
But yeah, either way, he's super, super well regarded. It's just 96 games in 2 seasons. How much more time does he need? How much of what we've seen is for real? These are totally unanswerable questions. I kind of think like maybe the Guardians should just treat him like a pitching prospect and just like, you don't know how many bullets you've got. You might as well, if he's healthy on opening day, you might as well see what he can do.
Yeah.
I think if he has a big spring, he's in the running for an opening day roster spot. I could,
especially if they trade Lane Thomas, which it sounds like they might.
The NFBC draft champions ADP for Chase DeLauter is 383. He's the 89th outfielder off the board. So look, if you play in a 15-team roto league, he's probably a bench piece. So
currently Roster Resource has Will Brennan as the Guardians right fielder, even with Lane Thomas there. So that's a clear opening for Chase DeLauter, who, by the way, was the 16th pick in 2022.
All right, the number 9 outfield prospect is Max Clark from the Tigers, a little bit further away. Actually, a lot of bit further away. 19 years old, first round pick in 2023, 3rd overall, loaded with tools, speed being the best of all. We just haven't really seen it translate to big numbers in the minors yet, but it's still so early on in his minor league career. Scott, do you eventually see those numbers catching up to the potential that we keep hearing about Max Clark?
I mean, it could. It's too early to say. I'm a little lukewarm on Clark, I think, relative to the consensus, because so much of his value comes from defense. Like that is his carrying tool right now. And so that's going to elevate his prospect stock, but we don't really care about defense in fantasy except to the extent that it affects a player's playing time. So, I've seen some scouting reports projecting him to develop power, and yeah, he can run fast as you'd expect for a guy who plays center field so well. But I do see, I can envision a scenario where it never manifests as hope, and Max Clark becomes this Mark Kotze or Nick Markakis type, maybe running a bit more than that, but just isn't nearly as impactful in fantasy as your prospect stock would have you believe. But this is a guy, 2023 was drafted ahead of Wyatt Langford and Walker Jenkins. So clearly there's upside there. I just hope we see clearer indications of it this upcoming season.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, and maybe, people won't be excited to hear this, but like prime Starling Marte, it's a good batting average, 15 home runs, 30 steals, obviously much better defense than Starling Marte, but I could...
Marte?
No,
Marte had a good run in fantasy. That I don't think anybody would complain about that.
All right, well, let's get it. Let's get it done, Max Clark. Number 8, you have Lazaro Montes of the Seattle Mariners, 20 years old, out of Cuba, 6'3". He has that slugger makeup, that projection. He hit 21 home runs with an 881 OPS in the minors this season. He's managed to hit for batting average and power so far, though he did struggle with strikeouts at high A, a 29.6% strikeout rate. Chris, some people mention Yordan Alvarez as the high-end comp here, and maybe that's just like the lazy comp for any prospect that, is expected to hit for big power and batting average. But I'm not sure the batting average will ever get there for someone like Lazaro.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have the hit tool that Yordan Alvarez did or does. I think the fact that they're both big left-handed Cuban outfielders probably plays a big part of the comp as well, an aesthetic comp.
It's a lot of biographical details. Yeah, the physical build is similar also.
But at the same level, Alvarez was already striking out much less.
Cuba expatriate who went to the Dominican Republic and actually worked with the same hitting instructor that Yordan Alvarez had there. But the strikeouts.
It's an unfair comp, right? Like that's an unfair count. Like what Yordan Alvarez became as a major leaguer is probably an unfair comp for any prospect.
Yeah.
It was probably an unfair thing to expect of Yordan Alvarez when he was, slugging around in high A. So like saying, oh, he's not Yordan Alvarez. Oh, okay. Well, that kind of goes without saying. What is he? It's, it feels a little like what Eloy Jimenez ended up being, where it's like a corner only, maybe a DH bat, which puts a lot of pressure on the hit. There's power there, but when you read the scouting reports, he's actually not hitting the ball as hard as you would think, given the profile and what the expectations are. Reading a scouting report from Fangraphs around midseason, his hard hit rate was down from 2023 to 2024. The average of his hardest 10% batted balls was also down from last season, and both were a little bit below average for a major leaguer, which he's not a major leaguer. He's 19 years old. So like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, he's not popping off the scales in the way he might need to, given the positional limitations and hit tool issues.
Yeah. I for the last couple years feel like I've been ahead of the consensus, higher than the consensus on Lazaro Montes, but I feel like I may now have dropped behind the consensus, and it's because low A this past year, he really seemed to be making strikeouts, making strides with the strikeout rate. And then he got to high A and it jumped back to 30%. And it's like, well, maybe it doesn't get much better than that. I don't know. But the power is so much that Lazaro Montes might just be able to overcome it.
Number 7 on the list, we have Josue de Paula with the Dodgers. He's 19 years old. Another big dude, 6'3". Fun fact, the second cousin of former NBA players Stephon Marbury and Sebastian Telfair. I thought that was so interesting. He's born in Brooklyn, but he was signed out of the Dominican Republic. It's just kind of an interesting story here for Josue de Paula. Power supposed to be the calling card, but minor league numbers tell us a bit of a different story. Only 10 home runs in the minors this season, 27 steals. Only slugged 356 at high A, lots of ground balls. It's got to be this is an interesting one. I know there's a lot of projection involved, but we haven't really seen big power yet.
No, but he's 19. Yeah. Actually, he was 18 most of last year and made it to high A, so he's ahead of the curve. The exit velocities are as high as they get for a player that age. And after reaching high A, Josue de Paula had 50 walks versus 38 strikeouts. Well more walks than strikeouts from a player that young against competition more advanced than him. That is super impressive. And so I think when you're talking about projectable teenagers, I know Lazaro Montes, he's going to be 20 before opening day, but like Josue de Paula, clearly I have him ranked ahead of Montes, has kind of replaced Montes as my favorite of that kind of prospect. Plus he's with the Dodgers, so of course it's going to work out.
And he's one who the exit velocity numbers do mostly back up the purported skill set in Josue de Paula's case, where he's putting up, some of the best 90th percentile exit velocities of any player in the Dodger system. Really high average exit velocities as well. So that's a good sign, even if the power in game is not yet there.
All right, number 6 outfield prospect, we have Emmanuel Rodriguez with the Minnesota Twins, 21 years old, out of the Dominican Republic. He has power, he has speed, great eye at the plate. Also lots of strikeouts in the profile here, 27.5% in 37 games at AA, which is where he played the most this season. He only played 47 games total. He dealt with a right thumb sprain all season. He had surgery after the season ended. Scott, it's an interesting profile. I feel like there are interesting tools here for fantasy, but the skill set, I mean, in terms of plate discipline, reminds me a lot of another Twins prospect that recently got called up, Edouard Julien. Now, look, they're different players, but that didn't really work out. So I'm interested to see where things go with Emmanuel Rodriguez.
Yeah, but Emmanuel Rodriguez is more of like a prospect than Julien was. Julien was a minor leaguer with interesting numbers, but some pretty glaring flaws. Rodriguez,
the fantasy world always liked Julien more than the real life prospect people.
Yeah. Part of that was defense. He can't really play any position, but part of it was exit velocity readings and that sort of thing. Like Emmanuel Rodriguez has been considered a high-end prospect for a couple years now. And now he's reached the upper levels. And he does have that one glaring flaw that he strikes out too much, around 30%. But it was more like 28% this year as he reached double in AAA for the first time. So I think the question of whether he can survive that strikeout rate as he faces more advanced pitchers, we're starting to get an answer to that, and it's an affirmative one. And then if you answer that in the affirmative, you got a guy who's reaching base at like a 450 clip and putting up elite exit velocities. And, oh, by the way, he can steal a bunch of bases and just does except for the amount he makes contact. Emmanuel Rodriguez does everything you would want a hitter to do. And I think it's going to end well for him. That's why I have him 6th.
Again, he's only 21 years old, but he did he get up to AAA?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he got up to
7 games there.
So my thinking is the way the Twins players go down, and Byron Buxton, God bless him, he's probably going to miss time in 2025. I think at some point Rodriguez will be on the fantasy radar in 2025. So
yeah, and he had a 3 true outcomes rate, so walk, strikeout, or homer, 58% last season. That is a startling number. That, it's one of those things where like he's extremely patient. It doesn't seem like it's passive when you read the scouting reports. Like it seems like he knows what he can hit and he just waits for it. The problem is, if you're that patient and you have those swing and miss issues that he does, it can really snowball and you might hit, 190. But, like if your worst case scenario is like Joey Gallo with speed, it could still be a pretty useful player for fantasy, even if it's not the super high end outcome you're hoping for.
What's interesting about his strikeout rates is they don't come with big swinging strike rates in the minors. It was 10.9% at AAA, 9.4% at AA.
Well, he just doesn't really swing.
Yeah,
right. It's the crazy high on base percentage. It can be a double-edged sword. We've talked about this a lot with a lot of players.
I think Edouard Julien is an example.
Yeah. And of course you want players to get on base. It's the most valuable thing a hitter can do in real life. But if it's happening by way of this extreme passivity, that's something pitchers can take advantage of. But when you hit the ball as hard as Emmanuel Rodriguez does, that makes up for a lot of issues.
It's
Plus,
a problem.
I think the passivity thing can just be cured.
It's a problem when it's Kevin Biggio and like the furthest he can hit a ball physically is like 380 feet, because then pitchers just, I'm not worried. Like I'll just start throwing you strikes, beat me. And that the whole profile tends to fall apart. If you try to do that with what Emmanuel Rodriguez has been in the minors, when minor leaguers try to do that, he'll just spit on anything he can't do damage on. It's just a question of, can he keep that up against major league pitching? It's a fair question, but I think it's an exciting profile.
The number 5 outfield prospect is Charlie Condon of the Rockies, 21 years old. He was the 3rd overall pick in this year's draft out of the University of Georgia. Top end power upside, has some sneaky speed, struggled mightily in his first taste at high A, 180 batting average, 1 home run, 518 OPS, 31% strikeout rate, only 25 games, Scott. So a very small sample. The problem for me is that I just don't really have much confidence in the Rockies' development. I mean, he was such an accomplished player in college. Maybe that doesn't matter.
Right.
But, some people are kind of scared off from this really small sample size.
Yeah, he was a hard one to rank because how much stock do you put in that 100 at bat sample where he went straight to high A from college? So it was a pretty aggressive assignment. And apparently he was dealing with a hand injury too, which a lot of times can have a big effect on performance. Apparently he did tattoo fastballs, and that's something he is known for doing. He does not miss fastballs. And that would be a concern for players who works his way up the ladder, sees fewer and fewer fastballs, obviously in the majors, sees the fewest of all, but he's going to be playing in Coors Field where those breaking balls get flattened out and often look more like bad fastballs. So it seems like a good matchup, a match there between skill set and venue, but it was a horrible pro debut. So this next year is going to be telling for Charlie Condon. He was a super decorated player in college, though, so I don't want to bang the gavel too soon.
I mean, and to put some color to super decorated, 1565 OPS in the SEC, 37 home runs in 60 games, which is, I believe, not the all-time NCAA Division I record, but it is the record since they changed the bats don't ping quite as much as they used to. So whenever they made that change, I think it was like 2009 or something. That is the most that anyone has had in a single season. He struck out 41 times to 57 walks. He is apparently like a viable enough defender that he may be able to stick in center field, which seems like a stretch, but might be there. I think we should take basically nothing from the 25 game sample size. And I think we knew that before. Like, we've had some really splashy college debuts over the past couple of years that have kind of changed the way people, like, the expectations for Wyatt Langford based on what he did in like 30 games last year got pretty outrageous. And I think people are holding that against Condon a little bit too much. And the Rockies of it all doesn't help. Certainly their track record is not great, but if it comes together at all, I think he's a 5th round pick in like a median outcome. I'm really excited about Charlie Condon.
But Frank does bring up a good point, and there hasn't been a lot of like actionable fantasy advice in these specific podcasts because we're just so much just digging into players. But this seems like a great buy low opportunity on Condon in dynasty leagues. I actually it was a poacher draft in one of my deep dynasty leagues where 5 players are protected, and then there's 2-round draft to redistribute the 6th and 7th best players on every team. And normally a prospect of Condon's caliber just would not be available in that draft, but he happened to be available in this one, and he lasted to me with like the 19th pick or something like that. So I was shocked to get a prospect of that caliber in this particular league, and it makes me think that however your particular league economy works, you could manage to pull off something similar.
The number 4 outfield prospect is Walker Jenkins with the Minnesota Twins, 19 years old, a first-round pick in 2023, 5th overall, 6'3", big body, could be a 5-category contributor for fantasy. He was limited by a hamstring injury this past season, but still got on base at a 394 clip, 6 home runs, 17 steals, 833 OPS. Scott, we haven't seen massive numbers from Walker Jenkins yet in the minors, but I mean, people seem to just be in love with his just long-term 5 potential.
I mean, that's basically it. I don't know what more to say than that. He walked more than he struck out between 4 levels of play. First of all, the fact that he advanced 4 levels, that's
as a 19-year-old. Yeah.
Only really good prospects do that. And between the 4 levels, 56 walks versus 47 strikeouts. Yeah, we haven't seen him produce much power yet, but he's supposed to. And we've said that for like half the outfielders on this list. It's just part of the developmental process. And we've seen it. We've seen it come true enough times to give credence to it. And Walker Jenkins right now he's among the prospects, I think, in contention for number 1 overall. He's not going to be number 1 overall on my list. He'll probably be in the back half of the top 10. He's only 4 here in the outfield. but he's that caliber of prospects. People love the upside.
All right, we get into the top 3, and all 3 of these names should have a lot of fantasy value here in 2025, beginning with Jasson Dominguez of the Yankees, and it should be time to unleash the Martian. And I think the Yankees are on board. They've already talked up how, they didn't say he's going to have a job on opening day because they don't want to promise that to a young kid, but it sounds like he should be an everyday player, assuming he doesn't fall flat on his face in spring training. He's turning 22 years old in February. It feels like he's been around forever. Didn't perform well in 18 games with the Yankees last season, but still put up power and speed in the minors. And he's being drafted like someone who's going to contribute. The ADP in the NFBC, 155.6 as the 36th outfielder off the board. Chris, what do you think about that price tag for Jasson Dominguez heading into next season? 155-ish, top 36 outfielder.
In a vacuum, I think it's perfectly fine. The problem I have had with Jasson Dominguez and where he's being drafted is more that he's been being drafted ahead of Dylan Cruz, who I just think is a better player with a much more locked in role. That's been less true lately. In the month of December, Dylan Cruz ADP is 140, Jasson Dominguez is 155. That's fine. I would not take Jasson Dominguez if Dylan Cruz is on the board, but if Dylan Cruz is off the board, I think that's reasonable. Dominguez has, the thing was Dominguez was always supposed to be this like special power hitter, and he hasn't really been. And the underlying data is not really there. At the major league level, I think it's fine. Like he played 8 games in 2023, and then last year was basically not an everyday player. I don't hold that against him, but he didn't hit his max exit velo in his 26 games in the majors, 110 miles per hour. Last year, his max exit velo at AAA was like 111, which is decent, but not top of the scale, which is what it was supposed to be for Jasson Dominguez. He's a good athlete. Yeah, no, he's a good athlete, but 64th percentile sprint speed, questions defensively. I think there's a lot of playing time risk this year. Like the fact that I think in hindsight, it's more reasonable than we acted last year, the way the Yankees treated him, right? Like Alex Verdugo was bad. And I think just try anyone with some hope instead of Alex Verdugo was a reasonable way to approach it. I don't blame the Yankees for not throwing Jasson Dominguez out there every single day last year. I think it was a reasonable way to treat him, given his track record, given everything that he's been through with the Tommy John surgery, all that. If he's not going to be a plus defender and might not even be like a plus defender in the corners right now, and the bat is a question. Like I think the bat really needs to play, or there is a chance he's not an everyday player in a way that I don't really think is true of Dylan Cruz. I guess is for. So I think
Cruz over Dominguez. Spoiler alert: Cruz is my number 2.
Yeah, I think he mostly suffers in that comparison. Yeah, and the ADP has changed enough that I think Dominguez is fine, but he was going ahead of Cruz for a long time before this.
Brian Cashman has talked a big game about Dominguez ever since Juan Soto moved on, and maybe that's partly PR, but normally teams are reluctant about awarding top prospects jobs.
He's talked about him. He's talked about him almost as much as he talked about Caleb Durbin.
Well, is that true? I didn't see many Caleb Durbin.
He talked a lot about Caleb Durbin, but
okay. Jasson Dominguez.
Hopefully they don't trade Jasson Dominguez.
The power production for Jasson Dominguez, even if the exit velocities were merely good rather than great in the minors, the power production was there and has been there for a couple years now. He had 11 home runs in 223 plate appearances. No, he had more than that. 240 plate appearances, 11 home runs. And obviously he's been a prolific base stealer in the minors. The plate discipline's been good. Like he's produced in every way he could and is ready for the chance. Defensively, yeah, it seems like I don't know that they're really going to be able to hand over center field to him, but maybe they'll try. There's clearly a lot of upside here for Dominguez, but I agree. Dylan Cruz should be higher.
All right, let's talk about Dylan Cruz, your number 2 outfield prospect. He's turning 23 in February, a first-round pick in 2023. He got 31 games in with the Nats, hit .218 with 3 home runs, 12 steals, 641 OPS, 12 steals in 31 games. Really stands out. Obviously, that's awesome. The Nationals, super aggressive on the base paths last year. They led all of baseball with 223 steals. That tells me that Cruz should have the green light once again in 2025. There's some things to clean up. The ground ball rate was way too high, but Scott, just in terms of plate discipline, zone contact, not chasing pitches, I came away pretty impressed with those parts of Dylan Cruz's game early on.
Yeah, it's a weird situation here because he wasn't actually putting up eye-popping numbers in the minors first professional season, first full professional season after being the number 2 overall pick. But the exit velocity readings were great. 90 mile per hour average, nearly reached 113 miles per hour. Zone contact rate, 89%. Only a 17.6% strikeout rate at AAA. So he was making high quality contact and lots of contact, but it wasn't really yielding big numbers. The Nationals decided that the underlying data said more about his readiness than the actual production. So they called him up, and it didn't go great, but he stole 12 bases for it not going great. So he was very, very aggressive, 12 bases in 31 games. And to me, that's what gives Dylan Cruz such a high floor for fantasy. If he's going to be that aggressive of a base stealer, then he doesn't have to be a big time masher to be a must start type of player in fantasy. And of course, he could still turn into a big time masher. He has that kind of pedigree. The data looks pretty good, the underlying data, as I said. So high floor and also high ceiling type of prospect here in Dylan Cruz.
Plate discipline looked really good as a rookie. I think he probably was a little more on the passive side, like had a pretty low zone swing rate, low chase rate as well. I think you can chalk a lot of that up to being a 21-year-old in his first taste of the majors. So I don't know. I think he was 21 either way. I just think, like Scott said, it feels like a really high floor. Like I'm expecting him to be pretty useful in batting average and stolen bases this year. And the biggest question for me is whether the power comes. And if it does, he was a top 10 worldwide prospect for like the last 3 years. There's a reason for that. So I'm very excited about Dylan Cruz.
All right. Well, you guys mentioned you would take Cruz over Dominguez. One other young outfielder just in that part of ADP, Pete Crow Armstrong. Who would you guys take, Dylan Cruz or Pete Crow Armstrong?
It's Cruz for me.
I rank Cruz quite a bit higher than Crow Armstrong, actually.
All right, I guess maybe people are kind of dreaming on the steal potential, but Dylan Cruz should have that too. So
I think Cruz has more. Well, maybe
he's not as fast as Pete Crow Armstrong, but he was 93rd percentile in sprint speed. He's very fast, and the difference in the bat might be enough to account for a difference in stolen bases, right? Like Pete Crow Armstrong is I'm still pretty skeptical that the bat's going to play as anything more than average.
And for that hot stretch late last season, Crow Armstrong actually didn't run that much. So I think he could be a big base stealer, but I have more confidence Cruz will be.
All right, your number 1 outfield prospect. Do I have it? Yes, I do. Roman Anthony of the Boston Red Sox, arguably the top prospect in all of baseball. He's 20 years old, 79th overall pick in 2022. Another name that looks like a 5 category contributor for fantasy, though the power could be plus. 396 on base this season, 18 home runs, 21 steals. He got up to 35 games at AAA. We saw big max exit velocities here, same number of walks as strikeouts at AAA. It seems like he's closing in. I don't want to say he's ready right now to be on the Red Sox roster, Scott. Probably at some point in 2025. The problem for it, just his value next season, is the Red Sox are loaded as of now when we're recording this. So it's what needs to happen for Roman Anthony to get a job? I don't know.
Well, I mean, Life will find a way if he does what he's supposed to do at AAA. He's a high enough caliber prospect that he could force his way into the picture for sure. Tyler O'Neill's left, so that helps clear up a spot for now. And I don't think there will be anything to stop him if Roman Anthony proves he's ready. And I think he's close to proving he's ready, because this is an example of a prospect like all the ones we've been talking about where, okay, all the underlying data looks great. Hits the ball hard, good plate discipline. Let's see it actually translate to numbers. And it seemed like the turning point for Roman Anthony last year was the first annual Future Showcase, All-Star Weekend, where he won the Future Showcase, mostly just because during the power hitting challenge, he hit monster shot after monster shot. It was a really gaudy power display for Roman Anthony. And then from that point forward, went back to playing regular minor league games, hit 353 with 8 home runs and a 1022 OPS in 52 games. So that seemed like where everything turned the corner for Anthony. He had strikeout issues in the lower minors, but as you point out, got to AAA. It was basically a 1-to-1 ratio. It's made huge strides in that area too. And just looks like he's going to be a big-time masher. It's between Roman Anthony and Roki Sasaki, I think, who's going to be my number one prospect overall. And obviously, Roki Sasaki's kind of an unusual case, being somewhat proven already coming over from Japan.
Yeah, not that anybody asks me or cares. He would be my number one prospect. I'm so excited about Roman Anthony. I think he's going to be a superstar. The only thing is just he is a left-handed hitter in Fenway Park, which it's not a bad place to hit. It's a bad place for left-handed power. So like the really, really high end, like 35 homer outcomes might be hard to get to, but the upside there is it tends to boost BABIP. So that might actually not be a bad thing if he's a 25 homer guy who steals 15 plus bases and hits close to 300. That's realistic for Roman Anthony. And I don't think that's the ceiling.
The only projection system available right now on Fangraphs is Steamer. And for Roman Anthony, they project 62 games with the Red Sox, 244, 6 home runs, 5 steals, 723 OPS. Obviously, it's a conservative projection, but do you think Roman Anthony plays more than 62 games with Boston next season?
I would take the over.
I would take the over as well.
Okay. The NFBC ADP in December is 369 as the 78th outfielder off the board. Would you rather take the shot on Roman Anthony or Heston Kjerstad from the Baltimore Orioles?
I have Anthony higher.
I think I have Kjerstad higher, but if you gave me some inkling of when Anthony will be up, I mean, Anthony has more upside. Yeah. Oh, I only have them one spot apart. I have Kjerstad one spot ahead of Anthony.
Okay.
Just put Anthony ahead.
Does that range sound right, though? Outfielder 78. That means in a 15-team league, he very likely should be drafted. And in a 12-teamer, maybe drafted as like a bench piece on, heading into this.
They're both at the end of my top 300. So I have them higher than consensus ADP. But I'm ranking for 12-team leagues where you can gamble on upside a little more. So maybe at a 15-team league, it does make sense to drop them a bit.
All righty, there you have it. Top 25 outfield prospects heading into next season. A Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all once again. We are going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again on Thursday. Bye-bye.